Review-SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 243. I am your host, Spencer Presley, breaking all of the embargoes, but let's be honest, who's going to actually listen to this show to find out? Hi! Shin Megami Tensei V reviews are out, unless you're me. That's a topic we might get to another time. I'm not salty about it at all. But you know what? All the kids who get paid money to talk about this game, they gotta review it. I hope. Did you get paid for reviewing this game? I hope you got paid.
I did get paid.
Okay,
yes.
That's very good. Mysterious guest who got paid. Thankfully, you are here to help not break embargoes with me. I'm here with Lynn. Lynn, little known review, had a tiny little bit of an upstir on Twitter. You may have heard about it. Reviewed Shin Megami Tensei V for internationalgamingnetworknews.org, I think was the site.
I even forgot that that's what it stood for. But yes, I'm Leana. I usually go by Len. I reviewed SMTV for IGN. You've probably, if you're listening to this, you've probably seen my review. You've also probably seen a meme on Reddit that collects a lot of the worst, most negative quotes from like 8 different reviews, and people think I said all of those, which is not true.
No, I will say I know the people who like made that image, by the way, that like makes it even like more worse of it. Like I thought the like divulge, like because like I knew. No matter what the situation was, like I didn't know what scores were going to be like. So the review embargo, for context of everybody, because we're recording this early, and this is going to be funny. Patron people are going to be hearing this over the weekend. This is going to go live for everybody on Tuesday, and the game's going to be out on Thursday, Friday for everyone. But reviews released Thursday, a day ago as of this recording, and I feel like for me, that already feels like a week ago. I'm sure for you it feels just like the world's longest 24-hour time lapse.
Well, I forget who it was that like posted that famous tweet that's like, every day Twitter has a main character and your goal is to never be it. And I was joking that like yesterday I became the main character of JRPG Twitter, basically. Like,
well,
nothing I have ever written in almost 10 years as a games journalist has ever been as controversial as this review.
It's so multifaceted, because I think it is literally like 2 of the lowest brow arguments I think happened yesterday, in my opinion, and we're going to cover it in a much longer form. But from someone who is very much on the outside of like, I'm reviewing this, and I also like read a lot of the reviews and stuff for it, so I kind of came at it from a very interesting middle ground. Especially because I've personally myself, I've been writing and doing reviews since like 2012, so I'm very much aware of the like, it is so like I think there is no lower brow of like, not even argument, of like just trying to make a joke out of like when people say like, boy, gaming journalism, TM, am I right? And I'm like, you guys are also the same people who probably think IGN is just one person who reviews all of their games. Like it is such a funny thing of like, the website has never mattered for me. It's the people who review it that actually matter. Like no offense, like if for whatever reason the world's best video game website had the worst reviewer, that wouldn't change my opinion of the website, just the reviewer. Like it's more of just a like kind of like picking and choosing each of your battles and stuff like that. But the 2 arguments I really hated seeing yesterday, even though I knew they were going to happen, just not to the extreme that I think probably anyone would have seen coming, was the side of don't compare X to Y because of Z, and look at fan base X, aren't they the worst now? Like, I hated how both of those popped up. It's just like, yep, this is just a de facto statement. Move over, Kingdom Hearts fans. You're now in second place. SMT fans have dethroned you from cringe counter, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I even pointed out on Twitter that like for every like really like nasty shitty DM I got like 5 that were from like, hey, I'm an SMT fan, and I just want to let you know we're not all like this, and like even if I totally disagree with some of the things in your review, I don't think it's cool that people are being toxic to you or whatever. So it's like, yeah, I've been in fandoms since I was a kid. I know there's always that small, like, toxic minority of people that, I don't know, the adults in their life failed them at some point, and so they think it's appropriate to throw like a full-on toddler temper tantrum because somebody disagreed with them about a video game on the internet. There's always going to be those people. Yeah, and I know that that's not the majority of people.
Well, and it's also weird too because I actually knew a few people who, like, I was seeing reports from like absolutely garbo sites, basically just like your normal clickbaity sites of like, look at the outrage that came out because of these reviews, and like I saw people I know, like who I'm personal friends with, like their tweets and stuff coming up with it. No one, when they're making those tweets, are making them out of, boy, I'm this livid because of this review. A lot of it is just kind of sad to say. It's people looking at a trend and being like, I'll get some likes for this one. Like I'm gonna like, it's basically like a pile on sequence. Like if anyone's ever seen that dumb JoJo meme, like when you see them beating up, like when you see those people beating up a guy in the street, you're the guy sitting on the table. You're either gonna watch by and not do anything, or think, you know what, I got a foot, I can press down on this person who's on the ground and get in on the action.
Yeah, and it's like, I've heard it all before. Like, get a hold of yourself. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, so like what was funny is like
that?
I was just one of those, like, it was funny because I even told my friends, like I would interject in the middle of people in a friend group talking about like, oh, look at this meme from the IGN review, or like, can you believe this? And be like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to that person tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. And let me tell you, that is a conversation killer if I've ever seen one.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I don't care about the memes. Like, if you can't handle being memed on, I think you probably shouldn't have a Twitter account. Some of them were kind of like lazy, I thought, but I thought some of them were funny. I like the Jack Frost meme. It was like, so much he, and yet you still chose to be a hoe. I laughed at that. That was good. I like, so some of them are pretty good. So, yeah, like memes are fine. Personal attacks, not so much. But if you want to post memes, that's not going to ruin my day.
So I guess we're of course going to be jumping all over the place with this one, but you are a person outside of actually reviewing one video game. So if you want to give a little bit of a bio of who are you, what do you do, and how did you actually get into this fandom that apparently people think you're not a fan of?
Yeah, well, I'm a freelance video game writer, so like anything I say for the rest of the episode, I do have to say, like, I don't represent IGN. I don't actually work at IGN. My thoughts don't represent any of my editors or like parent company, whatever, BS. It's all just my personal perspective. I write reviews. A lot of my writing is game reviews. I've reviewed over 110 games for various outlets over the last like 9 or 10 years. A lot of them are for IGN. I also sometimes write for like PC Gamer, PC Games N, a lot of stuff on PC. Which is, I think, maybe where the perception came that, like, I don't know JRPGs because I'm mostly a PC person, but it's like, I haven't played JRPGs since, like, Final Fantasy 1 on the NES. I'm officially old, so anyone who thinks, like, I don't know JRPGs, I was, like, going on ROM sites in, like, the early 2000s to get fan translations of stuff that was never released in the US. Like, I haven't played every JRPG known to man, but I'm well versed in the genre.
You'd like to have a life. I can understand that. I remember once when I used to have co-host for the show, I was the only one who had actually played every game in the Megami Tensei franchise. And what's funny is they'd be like, I feel so bad that I haven't played more of these games. I'm like, literally over half of this series is not translated. Do not feel bad. Like your first entry point can be a PC graphics engine game from 30 years ago or a dancing game from 3 years ago.
Well, and I should have. I think it's like a fair criticism that I should have made this more like upfront and clear in the review. But yeah, I am sort of a meme. I'm sort of a walking stereotype within the SMT fandom that I had like never played an Atlas game until Persona 5 came out. And I played Persona 5 and it like fucking changed my life. Like it's one of my top 3 favorite games of all time. Depending on when you ask me and what mood I'm in, I might say that Royal is my number 1 favorite game of all time. So if you're pointing fingers at me and accusing me of being a giant simp for Persona 5, yes, that's 100% true. And anybody that reads my review should read it with that in mind. And then I went back and I've played some of Persona 4. I have not beaten Persona 4. When that came out on PC, I picked it up. But yeah, SMT5 is my first mainline SMT game.
I have to say, I'm actually more surprised that P5 is your first anything Atlas. Like, normally I'm used to, like, oh, that's a pretty common jumping off point, but, like, so you never played Trauma Center, Demon Souls, Cubivore, none of their weirder stuff they put out? Didn't play Game of Thrones on PlayStation 3?
I didn't actually own a PlayStation ever until the PS4 came out.
Wow.
I've always been, like, PC and Nintendo. And I know some of the other SMT games did come out on, like, I think 4 is on 3DS, which I have, so I'm probably going to go see if I can find a copy of that now.
Yeah, good luck if you were a physical collector. That market became a complete dumpster fire last year.
Oh no. Well, well, at least Nocturne, I guess the remaster's on PC, so that one should be easy to find.
You know what? I had someone tell me recently. It was like, "Hey, I'm excited for 5. Should I play 3?" I'm like, "Dude, I platinumed that game. I don't recommend not saying never play Nocturne, but like if you're this close to playing the new hotness, like it's gonna feel like jumping in. It's like we're too close to 5. It's either gonna severely make 3 look worse or make 5 look way better by comparison. Like you're gonna think of things and be like, wow, if I thought this was archaic. like one of the funny things I think of like, because I've seen a couple things pop up in reviews of like, I thought the characters were a little flat and should have had a little more depth and expression. Whereas I'm coming off Nocturne HD reviewing that this year and be like, oh my god, they show up more than 3 times. Thank God, they're finally well developed. Like the bar was so low in Nocturne. It was so low.
Oh, okay. Well, I've heard mixed things about that now, because I've heard people say, oh, you might like it because it's darker, and I've heard people say you might not like it because the characters are even more of just like placeholders.
Yeah, so. Nocturne, especially I think with HD, is such a weird like double-edged sort of like. I think once that finally gets permanent price drop to like $20-$30, it will be instant like just grab it. But because it's like in that, because the fact that they had the gall to sell that for $50 at launch, it was one of those things of like, I cannot put enough exclamation points to recommending this game. Like there are so many little like, you know what? Be careful. Like you need to like make sure you've signed this waiver before I recommend this game to you.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing I wanted to say is that, like, everybody has gaps. Like, even when I sit down with my friends who are professional games writers, and I'm sure anybody listening to this podcast would be the same if I sat down and said, let's go around the room and be like, what's a franchise that you really feel like you should have played by now, but you just haven't? Like, I think everybody has an answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And, SMT was one of them for me. And, I think it's a very fair criticism to say, well, you shouldn't have reviewed SMT5 if you hadn't played any of the other mainline SMT games before. That's one of the criticisms I got that I'm like, yeah, fair. I mean, you can tell my editor that.
That's such a larger question. I want to get to that, but I have 2 things that are really similar to that I want to poke your brain about, especially coming from your camp of things. Do you classify Persona and Shin Megami Tensei as 2 separate series? Because in my brain, like this podcast even started as that shows how original my naming was. The Persona podcast. For the first 10 episodes, it was the Persona podcast, and then I changed it to Shin Megami Tensei Network because it's like, well, these are all connected. Like for me, I have never thought of them as 2 separate entities. Obviously, you can be a fan of one more than the other, but I've always thought it was so interesting how there are some people who are like, no, there's Persona. And then there's Shin Megami Tensei.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of like not a super easy question to answer. Now, I mean, I've played 1.5 Persona games and 1 SMT game at this point, and I'd say like the battle systems are like similar enough, and like the demons / shadows or whatever whatever the game you happen to be playing right now calls them, it's a lot of them are overlapping.
They use a lot of sprite swapping, a lot of PNG replacements.
Yeah. So I guess I would say that they're distinct, but they fall under the same larger umbrella, to where like I would refute the idea that like some people on Twitter are saying, oh, they're completely different series, they're completely different games, they're not going for the same thing at all. It's like, yeah, they share a lot of DNA though.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of how I would classify it.
Okay, and then the other one I wanted to ask was for for IGN perspective, in terms of, because I'm not sure how they would have come up to you to ask this, because I was talking about this when previews went live. Was it a week before reviews? And I thought, and I commented to myself and other people on the podcast, so I was like, I can already tell that no major site really wants to put a lot of energy into this, because almost none of the main sites wanted to actually hire anyone to review this like 50-plus hour-long game. So like, I thought it was very telling when previews were light. Obviously, the embargo was really strict and kind of dumb. But like looking at other aspects of it, of like, for me, I looked at that preview embargo, and even though I had to enlist it shortly after, like even just talking about it for 30 minutes, I thought just that opening chapter, there was so much for me as like a longtime fan to really dive into and talk about. But then looking at reviews, I thought it was funny of like, even reviews, it wasn't like there was more excitement in terms of websites to press publish for, and I know these are so different, but just like kind of to give the listeners more of a scope in terms of importance of review. Forza was something you wanted to make sure was simul-published at embargo at 9 o'clock. Like, Forza was ready to go. Every site had their top people on it. You've got your 8K rendered review ready to go. Whereas, like, SMT5 was like, yeah, it goes live, but, like, yeah, we can, like, freelance it off to someone. So, like, for you, what was that experience like of, like, how, like, did someone pitch it to you? Did you say, hey, I'd like to review this? And they go, oh, thank God someone will play this game?
Well, it is funny because when you say that, like, I was having a hard time actually getting like an editor to even look at my draft that day because of Forza and because like Call of Duty, where it's like we're having 3 different reviews go live, like for the single player, the multiplayer, and the zombies mode. And like, oh yeah, SMT5. Can somebody edit that really quick? Like it wasn't like they like didn't. You know, they weren't going to do a good job editing it or anything. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, we don't really care.
But there's different levels of different levels of the totem pole. Like the click through ratio. Like I'm probably sure if we doubled the amount of views on SMT, it probably is not going to hit like Forza. Just because that's a big game for people. That's a huge series.
You can look at the number of comments on the SMT5 review, which was pretty controversial, and the Forza review, which was not. And Forza has like 10 times as many comments, so that gives you sort of an idea of how many people look at each. But yeah, generally, like the editors I work with IGN, I've known for 10 years, some of them even longer. Like Dan Stapleton, the executive reviews editor, who's who I get most of my assignments from. Will either one of 2 things will happen. There's a big spreadsheet of all the games that we know are coming out, and you can put your name on that to express interest in it. I did express interest in SMT5 just because I liked Persona 4 and 5 so much. As like I'd like to see what else this company does. Or sometimes he will just come to me with, hey, there's this game coming out on X day, and here's the, how much time you're going to have with it before the embargo. Do you want to do this? So I think in this case it was a little bit of both. Yeah, I was definitely interested in it before it got like presented to me like, do you want to do this assignment?
Which is funny because it's like I can totally get it because it is like it's a large thing to put on. I noticed while reading through Kimberly at Game Informer's thing, I loved and was so amazed that like when I saw that she hadn't even beat it yet, I was like, okay, thank God. I was like, I felt like such a piece of I was like, man, like as I'm juggling like my like 40+ hour a week job on top of trying to do this and other things, like the fact that someone who had the game earlier than me hadn't beat it yet made me feel way better about having not beat it yet.
That is one thing about IGN that most other sites don't do, is if you write a review, you have to finish the game. So if everybody who's like doing, IGN is a joke meme, I can tell you that they have very high standards. They want you to actually finish the game before you can review it.
No more musings. So, no more
film musings allowed. I had some pretty late nights trying to finish SMT5 on a deadline. It was not an easy game to finish in the amount of time that I had. Although Atlas was more like there are some companies that will like drop an 80-hour game on you and say you have 5 days.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I have followed, unsurprisingly, doing the show for almost a decade, I have followed Atlas for a very long time, and they are very, very good at giving codes out, usually when you're in the press, at a very long time before. I remember with Persona 5, did you review Persona 5 by chance, or did you just play it when it came out?
I reviewed Royal. I didn't review the original. Yeah.
So kind of less so with Royal, but like Persona 5 Original was out in February for reviewers, which was funny because that game actually got delayed from February to April, which made that delay even funnier. Of like, yo, well, hey, people got that game, dude. But yeah, even with something like, yeah, actually, Royal was the same way. Royal was also hilariously, I'll never forget. They had that big preview event in 2020.
Yeah.
And the best part about that preview event was the game was done, in which I always would think, how funny would that preview event be? Just be like, just give me the game. Why are you making me play these 3 levels? Just give me the game's done. It's right here.
That's the other thing I really want to give Atlas credit for, is that like they'll give it to you like 2 weeks ahead or like a week and a half ahead, and it's like there's like no jank. It's like all the bugs are fixed. It's like butter smooth. I didn't run into a single major bug the entire playthrough of SMT5, which like with most other companies, especially like certain Western companies. I mean,
honestly, you could say with pretty much almost any, because a lot of them were like, "Hey, like, when our game is out,
here it's gonna be." Yeah,
it's usually a messy thing. But one of the things I want to bring up about that, because most people don't really ever note that, but the funny thing with Shin Megami Tensei V, there's like no plan for a day one patch. Like that, what the game we're playing is a game everyone's gonna have, and what's really funny about that is Atlas's work ethic has always been the same kind of thing of when their game is done, then they announce the release date, and then they just polish and get rid of as many bugs as possible. And even with something like DLC, all of that DLC has been done for months. All of that work has been done for months. And the best part about it was I had it confirmed way back when, but when this game got announced and shown off in June, the game was done in terms of Japan. They still had to localize it and everything because this was a simultaneous launch. Like, Japan's been done with this game for almost over half of a year at this point. And it's just so funny of like the way that their internal system works. Like, they were recording dialogue for the English version after everything was done with Japan. So I would like fancy like a funny bet of like at this point it's like something would really have to be broken for this game to like get any form of a patch, because like they're not going to update it for like restricting, because I know on Switch people haven't really talked about this. I take a lot of screenshots of this game because I think this game looks really gorgeous. I emailed them after the first like hour of playing the game. I said, "Are you patching in recordable video?" And they're like, "No, we don't want to have any chance of spoilers at all." Like, and I know like if it's not going to be changed, they're not going to do it. And I'm like, I think that is such a disappointment, because like this game looks really good in screenshots and it'll be good for Twitter and stuff like that, but like I think there are so many times where like I've been like, oh god, I wish I could just like save that like little 30-second clip. And I think like having that disabled is such a funny thing to knock, just because it's like you're like it shows it's such a photogenic game. Like I've never played a game on a Switch where I went, I wish this had a photo mode, because of how many games on Switch I'm like, you know what, dude, you're trying your best. Dying Light on Switch, you don't need a photo mode. You're doing good, buddy. You're doing everything you can, and I'm appreciating you.
Yeah, and it's like those skyboxes are so cool, but you can't really get a good shot of them with the in-game camera. So it would have been nice if you could just like point the camera straight up and see like.
And so that's the heartbreaking thing. Yeah. Is like unless something is horrifyingly broken, there's no way they're gonna like go back and bring that team to patch a game they've been done with for 6 months. So like, there's absolutely no way any of that's ever gonna happen. Like, so I always find it so funny when people saw the DLC get revealed. They're like, oh wow, Cleopatra and like Artemis and stuff. Like, oh, I wonder do you think they'll add anyone else? I'm like, no, dude. Like that's all like that's in the game. Like there's like nothing else is gonna get brought into that game card. Like this game would have to get like get like Final Fantasy VII intergrade level sales for like them to ever touch it again. And if they do, like the only thing in my hindsight is like whenever this finally comes to PC, which I know it will one day, like maybe they'll give you something else. But like this game, and I think this is also like a testament to it as well. Whenever I'm playing it, I'm like, man, I wish there was more of this game here. And kind of like what you were saying earlier, is like, it is very technically proficient, which going into it was very safe to assume it was not, because this is a new venture for them on Unreal Engine 4, and it would have been really easy for this game to have been a dumpster fire.
Right. And like, I think almost everybody has mentioned that there's like some performance issues, just because sometimes the Switch just can't hack it. Like, like there's some frame rate dips. There's some stuff where like grass will like pop in 5 feet in front of your face and stuff like that. But it's if those leaks about the PC version are true, I definitely want to try and play this on PC at some point too, just to see.
Oh my, like imagining.
Yeah.
Just like all the different aspects for it, because like honestly, it's really funny. Of like, I think it's interesting. I personally think a lot of the reviews have not been giving the game enough credit visually. So like I have way too many dev friends, and I like to compare, and like I like to get deep and look at all the dumb nerd facts that don't actually matter or affect the experience for it. But I legitimately keep telling people as much as I can, even though I know I'll never be a back of the box quote. Like, this is legitimately the most impressive exclusive Switch game with Unreal Engine 4. I think it is more impressive than Dragon Quest XI because it's only here. This is a third-party exclusive, and yes, it dips, but it's not like even like No More Heroes or Deadly Premonitions 2. Like, it is always playable. I would say at its worst, it gets to like the lower-ish 20s. And what's funny is actually, it's not like it hovers in the 30s. Like, there are moments, I don't know if you've noticed, when you're in like the World of Shadow menus, it's running at 60, and it's hilarious because I feel like I'm having whiplash. I'm like, hold on, why?
Oh yeah.
Because it's just completely uncapped resolution and frame rate, which I think just goes to showing of how they made the game with Unreal Engine. And it's just going to be so funny of like, it's going to be the easiest PC port of their life when they finally put it on there. And if I think this game, because like one of the funniest parts about this game, and one of the reasons I'm not farther in it personally, I hate playing it in handheld mode, even though it looks just as good on handheld and it runs at the same performance. Like, there's no performance dips only in handheld compared to TV.
Right.
But what's so funny about it is it's such a visual, stunning like game for me. I'm like, I'm doing a disservice not playing this on my 70-inch TV.
Well, I think you're actually like you're putting yourself at a little bit of a disadvantage too, because there's so many little things to find in the world that you might just not notice them.
There's a lot of GIFs going around. If you see a lot of GIFs of enemy animations, boy, I don't know how you felt. I love playing with how janky can I make a demon far away look. I'm like, I want this thing to look like an Atari 800 game. I want this to look like a chunky... Like, I want to look from halfway across the map and go, that's a flame, and then when I get up there, that's like 5 men jerking off in the corner. I'm like, alright, man, I didn't know what I was looking at, but I guess I gotta collect these men.
Yeah. Like, they're legitimately hard to spot sometimes in handheld, because it'll be like 4 red pixels, and it's like, oh, maybe that's a Memon over there. Let's.
But I will say, if you're someone who is handheld only, and like, as I've seen it on OLED, and I've seen it on even the Lite, it is, like, it's only one of those things that I would hate to go back and forth. If you're a handheld only player, congratulations, you have the best handheld looking game of the year.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think that holds up. It's a very, very good-looking game. It's extremely stylish. I love the design of the main character. Like, I think it's one of the coolest-looking main characters in like any RPG I've ever played. So, yeah, it's... I'm not going to spoil anything. Have you gotten to the point where you know who the Proto-Fiend is yet? Because that's super fucking cool.
I know who he is, I think, out of, like, picking things up, but no, let me tell you, because it was very, very funny, of, like, because I had the Prime Minister on, his voice actor.
Okay.
I had him on, and I went, because I got to a really big revelation point with his character, and I went, I'm loving having you on, but there are so many more fun things you can talk about with this game story, if you can actually talk about spoilers, but, like, at this point, of course, you can't talk about spoilers.
Yeah.
The game's, but, like, I personally, and kind of going back to the Nocturne discussion, the bar had been set very low for 3D voice-acted Shin Megami Tensei games, and this has pretty much given me everything I want. Obviously, I've not seen the ending for it in terms of how much completion for it, but, like, it's so funny of how little things, like, oh my god, that guy from my school, it's showing me how he's alive in this world. Because, like, the entire point of Nocturne, your friends are just running around this desert with no demon powers. You're like, what the hell? How are you alive? You're like a girl with jorts on. Like, how are you surviving in this world? And I'm getting fucking one-shotted in the desert. And what's so funny is, like, this game just does little funny, tiny things of being like, oh yeah, I've got a demon summoning program. Or like, oh, or like, these are the demons I'm using. Or I've been doing this. Here's why we should split up. Like, the little bits of narrative context are like an all-you-can-eat buffet for a long-time nerd like me, because it's just like, it's so little, like, it's so bare minimum, but compared to everything else in the series, it's been so nice to just have context, because nothing takes me out of it more than, like, you're in the apocalypse with all of your friends, but they're never with you.
Yeah, it's interesting because coming straight from Persona, I think I had kind of the opposite perception, where it's
Hmm.
like these characters are not developed enough. I didn't get to learn enough about their backstory. You don't get to. I mean, there's kind of one exception later, much later on, but you don't really get to spend a lot of time with them for the most part. Um,
I will say this, and it's kind of related to the characters, and I know this is a little bit of a harder one to pick, especially with how much you like Persona 5. I think the flavor text is a million times better than Persona 5. I wanted to talk to every demon and every NPC in the entire world. Like when you're on the world map and you can talk to all the other life pegs, like I want to talk to
oh yeah,
everyone and all that. Like the way they flesh out the world with the little flavor text felt so much more realistic to me than Persona 5, which was so funny because P5, it always feels like it's trying to feel like an open world, but with a PlayStation 2 game's budget. Whereas this felt like it was just trying to be a world with a very tight and restricted budget, but fitting it into the story. Like, there's a moment which I thought was really funny, I wish I could get into, of like explaining why the NPCs almost look and feel so faceless. And I was like, that is so great. And even if we don't ever get
I
deeper than
remember
this,
that.
like
Yeah.
it's so nice to just hear like another NPC being like, "Hey man, I feel like I'm just no one in a sea of faceless people." And I'm like, "Thank you. That's all I need. Like I need us to comment how there's like 5 students at this school and everyone else is an NPC."
Did the previous, because like kind of the impression I got is that this is not a thing in other SMT games, but do any of the previous games have something like SMT5 does, where you go back and forth between the
No.
apocalypse and the
No, no,
non-apocalypse?
no. That was
Because
one of the funny things of it was such
yeah,
a that was actually a big concern of a lot of people of being like, I don't want this to feel like Persona going back and forth. And what it was so nice of like, yeah, because SMT has very much been like, oh, I'm a student, I'm exploring the world. Oh my God, everyone's dying. I guess I'm never
yeah,
going back home. And like this one is so funny of like, and I will not give away the twist of why you're going back and forth.
right.
I really, really like that setup for it. But what's so great about it is like it makes both worlds feel believable, which is such a hard balance to hit, especially because the world has almost been in. I think SMT4 does a good extent with it, but SMT4 doesn't let you live in both worlds long enough because SMT4's big conceit, spoilers for game from 8 years ago, is basically you're in a old samurai village and you're exploring the demon-filled caves and oh my God, Tokyo was underneath you the whole time. Well, we're never going back to that
Oh,
old boring
interesting.
village.
Okay.
So whereas like this one is like you get to go back and forth and they both add and give like context and like basically added subtext to both sides of it, which is so much nicer of like imagine what this game would have been from like a storytelling. I'm sure you could tell the exact same story if when you walk under that bridge with your friends and you're transported to Dot and you never went back, you could still probably tell the exact same story. But like
Yeah,
it just lets you like it slows things down. Like one of the really really nice things about this game I like is that it has moments where like I finished this boss. We're just gonna have cutscenes for a while. We're gonna catch our breath. We're gonna go back. We're gonna talk to people. We're gonna kind of touch base with the situation, and you don't ever really get those moments before because it was very much bam, bam, bam. I'm going to location. I'm fighting. I'm going to a location. I'm fighting. So like they really, really kind of did a great job of making this feel like hilariously the most down to earth SMT game. But of course, then if you're comparing it to like the social elements of Persona, it's gonna feel like eating a dinner that is nothing but white bread. But like if you're comparing it from an SMT side of things, it's like, oh, thank God, like they took the right notes without copying Persona, which I think would have been the easier outcome actually.
see, and like I kind of feel like, and this is maybe something I would have focused on more if I had more background in the rest of the mainline series, and like if I had the review to do over again, I might have focused more on this. I kind of felt like the fact that you can go back and forth sort of defeated what I'm hearing now from a lot of mainline SMT fans is something that they like about the series, and that it didn't really feel as like dark and oppressive and isolating, because there was this, I mean, obviously there's a story twist related to it that is pretty interesting, but the fact that I could kind of go back to this normal world whenever I wanted, you can hit L1 and you can teleport back to, a fountain or whatever, and just go back to this kind of normal seeming world. I feel like I would have liked it better if maybe it was just like, no, it's apocalypse happened. You're stuck here now. Maybe we'll have a hub town. I agree with what you said about the pacing, for sure, where it's nice to have that breather in between. But maybe that could have happened in a different way. There's also another story thing that I can't really talk about, where the apocalypse is kind of limited in scope, which made it feel less like all-encompassing dread, I guess.
I know what you mean, and yeah, it's tough to talk to without getting into specifics. Like, I think if you broke down the amount of areas and what you're doing in this game, it would be very easy to look at it and go like, wow, this is actually a really tiny game. But I think it uses its limited volume really interestingly. Like, there's a lot of points, and I'm playing this game very much of like, I'm not trying to rush. I've been covering this game forever.
Oh, yeah.
The last thing I want to do is get all 4 endings and do everything, and like, I do not want to 100% this game in the next week or 2 or even month. Like, I want to really digest on this. But what's been so funny about it is like, just kind of taking my time and doing all the quests and kind of just living in the world as much as I can. I keep finding myself surprised of like, I look at the scope of this game and I go, this was a really interesting game of, I can tell that they had a large budget by their comparison, but they were very conservative with where they spent money and how big they wanted this game to be. Like, this does not seem like a game to me that had feature creep. Like, they had a vision, they knew their budget, and they executed on it.
Well, and that's another thing that I like, especially when you mentioned social links and Persona. This is another one of the misconceptions that I kind of wanted to spell, is that, like, when I say I was not into the character development as much in SMT5, that does not mean that I want it to be Persona. That does not mean that I want them to add a dating minigame. That does not mean I want it to be about the power of friendship. I think you can have, like, really, really, like, fucked up dystopian, like, misanthropic, horrifying stories that also have, like, really in-depth character work and stuff. And that might not be as important to some people as others. And if so, my particular review probably is not as useful to you, as an individual. That's the one thing I want to get at, is like, no, I don't think they should turn SMT5 into Persona. I don't think having a slice of life half of the game would work with this type of game at all. It's more that I'm not saying it needs to be more like Persona 5. It's more like I'm saying I clicked with the character development in Persona 5 more, and I kind of would have liked to have seen more of that style of character development in SMT5.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I definitely get that. Like, even if you like compare it of something of like, if you're running around the Netherworld with one of your students and stuff like you do in the game, you're not even going to like get on a like superficial Morgana level of connection. Like, there's just not, you're not spending that time with those characters, and like, it is totally fair to like miss that or want that. Trust me, every time I looked at the Prime Minister, I went, I need you in me and my party. Come here.
He should come with you. He's so fucking cool. Yeah, for sure.
Like, trust me, if I could bang and date everyone in this game, I would bang and date everyone in this game. There's like, if you look at the Council of Demons, I'm like, this could just be the world's nastiest Bang Bros video, and I'd be here for it.
Well, and especially once you know, like, what the twist is with Tao and the Nahobino and the Prime Minister, it's like, I just want to play like another 40 hours of these three, going around doing cool shit. So, yeah.
So like, one of the other things I wanted to kind of ask you with at least about your review, and I just thought it was so funny of why people latched onto it so much and so negatively. So from your perspective, when you're like setting up, like, I forget if it was the tagline or like the first opening paragraph for it, the like Persona without the heart thing for it, I totally know where you're coming with it for it, but I find it so interesting. In I guess 2 parts. One, why people look at that and go like, how you kind of don't see your side. Like, for me, this might be different just because I've also like written reviews and stuff as well, and kind of coming at it from a critical eye of like, hey, that personality is just not there because that personality is not really part of the series. Like, it is totally fair. And like, you've mentioned this a lot, and I've been meaning to interject and say this. Like, I love when people who are new to a series just jump in and review it. Like, there's no reason, and this will definitely come up in questions, like the amount of people who've asked, like, why didn't IGN get their SMT expert? Spoilers, everybody! There is no SMT expert at IGN. Like, as I talked about before, this was not the hot shit to review. Like, even though I view this and everyone listening to this podcast, this is a big game for us. This is a big game for Nintendo Switch. Like, this is a big, long in development exclusive. Like, this game was announced with the Switch. It's been a long road coming, but we are all not on the same level of field for it, and not every website is going to have someone who's like, all right, I'm coming out of retirement. I've got to do the SMT5 review. It's like, guys, like we're just not at that level. And what's funny is like, I wonder why SMT and even Persona gets in that level where it's like no one's looking at Final Fantasy VII remake to be reviewed by the guy who wrote the Prima strategy guide of Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy 16 won't be reviewed by a guy who has spent 1,000 hours in Final Fantasy 14, or else it won't be taken seriously.
Yeah, well, like, I kind of have 2 points on that. One is that, like, I am considered, like, an RPG expert out of IGN's freelancer pool.
Okay, I was wondering if that's, like, a self-entitled thing, because I'd be like, I'm way too self-deprecating to ever be like, I am the expert of role-playing games.
Yeah, well, like, that's one of the things that they will go to me. Like, if there's a big release out and it's an RPG or it's a strategy game, I'm like one of the first people on deck. I don't.
Where is your review of Caligula 2? That's what I need to know. I won't respect you without a Caligula 2 review.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get to review a lot of JRPGs, unfortunately, because if it's something like a Kingdom Hearts or a Final Fantasy, there are 4 or 5 IGN staffers I would have to fight to the death in order to get that review, because it's just such a popular series. SMT, they might not even know what it is. I don't want to like automatically assume that.
No, but I mean, looking at all the general press coverage, because like for me, I love diving over everyone's reviews because it's like a litmus test of like how much did this person in this site like have invested into it beforehand. It's always really funny of like, and it's never equal. Like there are so many times of big sites have someone who's really really into them, and then other times if it's not, because like it's funny you mentioned like even on the totally opposite end of this, spoilers, when Persona next has a game ready for review, that's not going to be just like shit it out to a freelancer. That's going to be someone's going to call dibs because Persona's my baby. I've got a Phantom Thieves tattoo on my left butt cheek or something, and I've got to review Persona. And it's like funny of like, even though Shin Megami Tensei has just as many of those fans, it's one of those weird series where like I am always trying to get more people in games media on this show, because there is such a, especially with like more niche series like this, or maybe with Tales, or even something like the Trails of series, of like, because we're niche and because we don't get a lot of representation in games media, it is so hypercritical. And what is so funny, because like people are not bashing your review, even though they are saying they might be bashing your review online, because guess what? At the end of the day, you gave it an 8. This is a game you liked. Like this isn't I
really liked it.
Like
you, I loved this
with
game.
The way we talk about this, like the way people have talked about your review, like can we change it to a 4? Because clearly they're thinking your review was a 4.
No, I loved it. I love this game. And so, it's like, yeah, we might not have an SMT expert on staff, but the one other thing I wanted to say is, like, if you're listening to this and you think I did a bad job and you want to review the next Shin Megami Tensei game, send me a DM on Twitter. Like, see, I'm not even joking. I can tell you who to email. I can tell you how to format it. I can even tell you what I think is going to, like, catch their eye in terms of, like, getting your application seen. Like it doesn't hurt me at all if I pass this along to someone else in the future. I'll be fine. I'm not like losing my livelihood over that, and I would be happy to help you out in like getting. You have to be able to write. Like I won't if you can't write. If you can't write well, if you can't write on a deadline, it's not going to work out. But I would love to help some like really hardcore SMT fan get into this game so that, you know, when the next one comes along, I can be like, hey, you know who'd be great for that? This person.
Well, I'm glad you've discovered the real reason why I brought you here. But it's really funny, actually, because you bring up a really great point of something I wanted to talk about. And also, I've discovered a lot because, so basically, I started doing freelance in 2012, working for anyone and doing whatever I could, while doing this on the side and kind of doing my own things. And as basically the prevalence of, I guess, freelancing for other sites and less so of, like, basically, if you weren't one of the X number of big sites, having your own smaller site was just kind of you doing free work for someone else who's not you. And
Yeah.
I got to a point of, like, you know what, let's just try doing this on my own. And what's been so funny about it, it has been really liberating focusing on doing this show, and where it's posted on YouTube and stuff, I just have it, like, this is not Shin Megami Tensei on YouTube. This is just Spencer. Because I want to talk about SMT every week, or maybe I want to review, like, Fatal Frame, or maybe I want to talk about the PlayStation Vita because it's 2021. And stuff like that will happen, and what's funny is it's been so really fun and liberating to kind of do that on my own again, but the amount of weird roadblocks I will get to in certain aspects of, like, if I was a fan site or worked for a fan site, I can guarantee you I would have a million times better access than I am a dude doing this on my channel with, like, almost 5,000 subscribers, which is funny because it's, like, one of those weird things I've noticed of, like, certain companies have different levels of how they want to do stuff. So, like, kind of like how we were talking about with Atlas being very, very proactive about getting their codes and stuff out. This was a rare example of, I got it, I think, like 4 or 5 days after normal press, along with a bunch of other people. And that was way, way, way more time than I would have thought going ahead of this. Because with this being a simul launch, I was just expecting to not get the game or get it on day one. Which, like, let's be honest, if this show has been going for this many episodes and it's called Shin Megami Tensei Network, it'd be a little weird if I didn't get a review code, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the world. It's the world we live in. There are many SMT games I've not gotten for review. But the funny thing about it, though, is it's actually really kind of lit a fire at my ass again of, like, I want to just, like, work for, like, I need to, like, just get myself out into doing more freelance stuff again, because what's so funny is, like, when it's just for myself, I have to go through so many more hoops than if I just was, like, if I just contacted people I knew at other sites to let me cover the games for them, because what's so funny is, like, this weird back and forth, and I'd love to pick your brain on this one, of, I literally, for the last couple of weeks, have been talking with Atlas of, like, because I'm a big nosy butt, and if this is the only thing I talk about every week, I know when my embargo is, and I know when other people who aren't me's embargo are. So, like, what's funny is, like, going into other things of, like, in this industry, if you know enough people, it is very easy for you to get on a casual level of, like, hey, what's your NDA for this? What's your thing look like for this? Because everyone has different levels and different aspects, and I'm coming from the interesting side of, like, if I know when... So basically, when I got my code for SMT5, it was like, cool, don't say anything until launch. I'm like, I do a weekly show about this. That will be very impossible for me to lie to everybody about this game when previews are happening and reviews are happening. And so I was kind of writing that interesting line of, like, when previews dropped, I did a 30-minute preview as well, and when reviews dropped, I wanted to talk about reviews. But what I wanted to kind of ask you about was curious of, like, as someone who also covers games, like, how would you feel about... Because it really, for lack of a better word, it's segregated reviews. It's like what Atlas wants is, we want press to have their own day, and then they want to have the quote-unquote, because I do not consider myself this word, I do not consider myself a streamer or a content creator. Content creation people, they're on launch day. They want all the, like, streamer people, online people, do that on launch. Because we can't control you. We know that you're not just going to do a normal kind of level of coverage, and you're not going to spoil anything or whatever. So, like, hypothetically, I get it, but it is one of those funny things of, I think there's such a difference of, here's my review with everyone else in games media, and then here's just my review when you're probably just playing the game yourself. Because, like, I've mentioned this before, the last thing I want to do is talk to people about this game when they could just be playing it. Like, I want to talk to people when they have questions before it's in their hands, but it is such one of those funny things of, like, if you have questions and I'm going to answer your question when you could find it out yourself, it kind of makes my point a little bit less interesting. So, like, if the boots were kind of set in your say, I'm not sure if there's, like, a series or something where, like, if you found yourself in this situation with a series you really liked, for you, how do you think you would hit with that? Because it's one of those funny things of, like, it's not like the number really matters in terms of who's looking at what and who's doing what. It is very much kind of an internal politics thing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because that has literally happened to me. I think in Japan, they are much more likely to favor traditional press, because they don't really... A lot of the big Japanese game developers don't really understand the whole influencer content creator ecosystem as well yet, or they're afraid of it. But there are some North American and European developers who will like give stuff to influencers and like YouTubers and Twitch streamers first, and then like we don't get it until a week later. So that has actually literally happened.
Oh my god, yeah, wasn't it like that was even like the thing with like Back for Blood? I remember people were streaming fucking Back for Blood, and the review embargo was 2 or 3 days later. It was like, what the fuck is this?
And the reason is those streamers have probably signed something that says they're not allowed to provide a review of the game, which is sort of the semi-sneaky way of saying you're not allowed to criticize it, so that anybody who sees you playing it in that week leading up to the review embargo will like only hear positive things about the game, and then we can like give the real talk after that. So that has happened before. I will say Atlas is like very unusual. I think the review embargo I signed for this is one of the strictest that I've ever signed.
No video.
Like,
no, nothing.
Well, it was we could not capture any video past the first cyst, which is like 4 hours into the game, basically.
Oh, but that's being generous. I was gonna that's like I could see that at like maybe an hour.
Yeah, and it's like you could get there in an hour pretty reasonably if you skip the cutscenes. And I even sent an email like, I don't know how I'm supposed to produce a video review from this. Like, can I show Minato? Like, if I just stop at the end of the first area and like I won't show any cutscenes, I won't show any dialogue. I just want to show like running around Minato, and they were like, "No, absolutely not. We will not."
I'm gonna have the sickest Microsoft like PowerPoint presentation. It's gonna be like a slideshow of like, "All right, class, we're talking about this now. Enjoy random screenshots for my like." I'm just fully ready for my video review. Will just be 600 JPEGs playing back to back.
Yeah. Well, like that was one of the comments on the YouTube videos. Like, why is she talking about? How bosses will destroy you, and then you're showing fighting an enemy that's like 37 levels higher than you. And it's like, because that's all I could show. Like I can't, like I'm running around with this like crappy level 8 team with like a pixie and like a slime in it, and it's like, yeah, that's all I could show. Unless it was in a trailer. We used some trailer footage in the review. But yeah, like I couldn't show off my awesome end game team that I made, where it's like nobody's weak to anything, and I've used all these stat increasing items to make them totally ridiculous. Yeah, I couldn't show it.
It's that one's the embargo has been weirdly strict, but that strictly much comes from this. Sega is so going through a growing pain with simultaneous worldwide launches. Like, Lost Judgment was less strict in terms of its gameplay, but was very much stricter in terms of when you were talking about it and what you could really show. It's just because, Japan basically just thinks, and as soon as you have the chance of leaking this game, it's probably going to leak. That's why I've actually thought it was really funny that, at least to my knowledge, as of now, the Switch code for SMT5 has not leaked, thankfully. But it is one of those things of, man, like, because Switch piracy is Switch piracy, like, that's just going to be an inevitability that just kind of happens once it's out. Hopefully people actually buy the game and support it, because that's how you should be. But it is one of those funny things of, I think, with it being a Switch exclusive and with that being such a big deal. And also, another thing that press always, it's easier to forget because we don't interact with it. This is also half a Nintendo first-party game. Nintendo is publishing this game everywhere that's not America and Japan. Nintendo is publishing it in the entire. They are basically treating this like a first-party Nintendo exclusive over there.
I didn't even know that. Yeah. Did I answer your original question?
No, you 100% did. It's just it was one of those funny ones of I get to talk to people normally in the same field as me, but less so with the people who do reviews on a more often basis with it. It's just because like it sucks because obviously we're getting the game early, we're getting the game for free, so like I can't really like when I write back and I go, hey, can I do this? Because I know what they like. I would never basically purposefully break an embargo to upset somebody, but like I will definitely tiptoe around the rules after asking questions, because a lot of the time is like I know that I'm working with a super small audience already to begin with, on top of the fact that like I think maybe twice in my life has someone from Atlas Japan cared enough to actually contact me for any of the dumb shit I say. Because one of the funny things is with how often, because I am at least lucky enough to know people who work on both sides of Atlas, whether it be West or Japan, is with all of the crazy stuff I've ever talked about with things before, is that I've at least never had someone blatantly call me out and be like, that's not true, and here's why. Because like I remember for the longest time, one of the funniest things I would say is one of the reasons SMT5 took so long to get re-revealed was they were basically in development hell for like 2.5 years because that team had never touched Unreal Engine 4 in their entire fucking life, and they were just ripping their hair out trying to get it to work. And so it was, and I mean, like, let's be honest, if you had to give a new team whose primary resources were 3DS games that looked like Super Nintendo games and said, cool, make a Fortnite mod into an RPG and make it on the least powerful system that runs this engine, they go, awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what they were able to do, all things considered. Yeah, for sure. Like, and UE5 isn't even like, or was it 4 or 5 that they made this on?
4. Yeah, 5 is still 5 is still getting worked on, but 5 is pretty much more of a 4.5 anyway.
Yeah, like it's not the easiest to work with. I've worked a little bit with UE4 and a little bit with Unity, just doing modding, and like the difference between the two is, I think there's a much higher learning curve for UE4 than
well, and especially because I feel like if you're coming from the Japanese side of development, it's such a just wild west of quality out there. Like, look at something like I mentioned it earlier, Caligula 1 and Caligula 2. Those are Unreal Engine 4 games that look budget as hell. But that's also like they're doing their own best. But then look at other companies like Tekken and Square Enix with Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. Those are also made in Unreal and look stupid good.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's just not really like a good kind of in between, especially because with Atlas, I think they've definitely gotten a really big pass because of their presentation. And I think also that has thankfully transitioned over to SMT5, whereas like I think if it wasn't for its graphical style, it would be very easy for that to be a muddy, ugly looking game. Like, let's be real, there's a lot of brown in this game, and I'm surprised always at how much colors I see.
Yeah, it's very like the color palette is very diverse, like from area to area, and even within there's certain areas, sub areas within larger areas that like completely change up the visuals, like palette quite a bit. You probably have been to the one I'm thinking of.
Yes, there. One of my favorite things I did in my preview, because the preview I think I'd played around 10 hours, and I pretty much finished the first main area. And one of the things I was so amazed people latched onto was I hadn't experienced a dungeon. And everyone on message boards were like, holy shit, there's no dungeons in this game. It's Breath of the Wild. What are we going to do? And what's really funny is, like, I didn't even think about that my entire playthrough of that first 10 hours. I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, I was just so enwrapped of the, wow, this is a nice, larger environment. Because, like, it's not open world. It's far from open world, but it is very vast, and it is a lot of verticality and stuff that we're not used to in the series. But what's funny is, like, I never found myself missing dungeons, but it was funny then comparing it of like, okay, what is this like in lieu of a dungeon? And I actually wanted to ask you something. I'm not sure if you mentioned this exactly in your review or what your takes were for it. I thought this was a really interesting thing I'd seen popping up with reviews of there being too much combat. And I think that's so funny of seeing people leaning into that, being like, oh my gosh, too much combat, what'd you expect to do in the game? But what was funny is, as I was thinking about that, even at my point, 35 hours in, I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of combat. Like, there's not a lot of not combat in this game.
There is, and I want to, like, again, clarify, because I think a lot of people that saw the Reddit meme think that all of those quotes are from my review. I did not at any point say that there is too much combat in this game. I think I said that there was... What I exactly said is there are some areas, particularly later on, where you have to fight like the same group of enemies, like the exact same composition of enemies, like 15 or 20 times in a row. And I thought those were a little bit repetitive, because it's like, okay, I know exactly the like order of abilities I need to use to kill these guys as quickly as possible. And I mentioned, again, I committed the cardinal sin of comparing it to Persona, and I was like, you know, the Showtime attacks are the unstable shadows that were added in P5 Royal. I'd love to see something like that here, because it just gives you every once in a while you're going to roll this number on the dice, and now, oh, you have a slightly different encounter. I think SMT5 could have benefited from something like that, where it's just like a random weird thing that can happen in battle, where it's like, okay, I've fought this exact group of enemies very many times already, but now something weird is happening, and I have to figure out what to do about it. But no, I don't feel like I don't feel like, except for maybe that last dungeon, the very very last dungeon. So I don't think you would have seen this yet. I didn't feel like there was too much combat. Like I thought the platforming and the exploration and like finding Mimon and finding whatever those like white crystals are that give you a whole bunch of glory.
Oh,
I felt like
the glory,
yeah.
basically the apple of Eden and stuff.
Yeah. Like I felt like that was a good break from the combat. I could have, I would have liked a little bit more story, a little bit more character development. But overall, it's like the battle system's fun as hell. Like I didn't really get tired of it.
Yeah.
I got tired of fighting the same groups of enemies too many times in a row. But I really like the combat. Like I really do.
It's very interesting. So like when I kind of found myself agreeing with the combat thing, it's actually not of I'm getting burnt out. It was one of those interesting things of, you know what, I wonder if this is coming because of the lack of traditional dungeons, is that there's really no puzzles. And not in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be one of the things that people are going to have a probably more adverse reaction to, of this is not a traditionally designed JRPG by any standards. And I think it has a lot of interesting things to gain by doing that, but also at the same time, there are probably going to be a lot of traditionalists, once they get their hands on it, who are going to pick that game up at launch and go like, what the heck, like where's the dungeons?
Yeah,
and I think that's a valid criticism that I think just plays really tone deaf talking about it without being able to show it, especially without people being able to see it firsthand.
Well, and I think that might have also been part of what was missing. Like when people talk about, the SMT games, the mainline games are so like dark and oppressive, it's like I feel like part of the reason that was missing is just because you don't have a lot of areas where it's like, oh, I'm descending into hell. And again, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to compare it to Mementos in Persona, which felt really oppressive because it's getting darker and spookier the more and more like levels you descend. And there wasn't really, the second dungeon is really good at that. But I think that was like the only area of SMT5 that made me feel that way, because it's broad, it's spread out, it's this sweeping landscape. It doesn't really feel like it's getting more dangerous and more, foreboding the further you go along, because you're just kind of running around exploring. I also agree with the lack of puzzles. Again, the second dungeon is the exception. I think the second dungeon has some clever puzzles. The last dungeon tries to add a puzzle element that I feel like isn't really a puzzle element. Like people will see what I mean when they get there. But it's just like, I walked through a doorway that froze time, and now I need to go find a different doorway that unfreezes time, and it's right over there. Okay. So you just made me backtrack, basically. That's fine. The last open world area, I will say, if you like jumping puzzles, there are some Mimon in like the last open world area that require you to like backtrack 3 counties and like do a lot of really difficult jumps to get to, and I liked that. So later on, there is some stuff like that.
I am amazed. Like, I think one of the reasons I didn't find myself missing traditional dungeon design and puzzles was like, it was giving me things I didn't know I wanted or enjoyed doing. Like, if you had told me before playing this game, hey, are you going to go for all the Mimon? I'm like, no, there's 200 of them. Why would I want to collect the... Like, I'm probably going to get like a fucking high 5 or something of the... Like, I'm not going to get anything good for this. But the best part was, they have really great tangible rewards for finding them.
Oh, yeah.
They all have interesting dialogue that is actually dependent on where you find them, and explores kind of the lore of the world a little more.
A lot of the world building comes from talking to those guys, actually.
And it's completely just optional. Like, finding stuff is like fun. Of like finding them and finding the apples of Eden are just so satisfying for so many different kind of reasons and stuff. Like, honestly, if I could make my text notification be that apple crunch sound when you get oh my god, it just gets all the endorphins in all the right place. Like, so I think it's funny of like, it's easy to say, oh, they're not here, so that's bad, but like, I kind of like what they changed it up with, because honestly, a lot of times when I'm playing through JRPGs and it's just the same corridors, just with a couple of different more puzzles, I'm not looking at those puzzles going, boy, these were all fun. I kind of liked the aspect of, like, I'm platforming, I'm adventuring, and the fact that this game actually kind of worked as a platformer in a game development series that has never done platforming. Like, guys, the fucking series with the grappling hook gun doesn't even platform. like, if we're gonna talk about comparisons with Persona, like, this has a way... You feel way more like a Phantom Thief as Nahabino than Joker ever has.
And it's good platforming. Like, it feels good. Like, it's not like they slapped it on there and it's like, oh, RPG developer tried to add platforming elements and, they did okay. It's like, no, it's actually very good platforming.
So we have pretty much, like, about half an hour left. Do you want to try and knock out questions and hopefully not lower our IQs too much?
Yeah, let's do. I think I've already answered some of them that I saw on Twitter, but yeah, if there's any we haven't gotten around to, go ahead.
Yeah, and also I just want to say thank you also to I noticed a awesome trend because I asked this on Facebook, Discord, Twitter, and YouTube, and the best part was the only place people pretty much could have commented anonymously was Twitter, and what was great is every time I saw someone who had a less than favorably worded question, I just tap on their icon and go, okay, I don't know how you found me, you do not follow me or the reviewer, so okay, thank you for having a bored day on Twitter, and just continued on with my day.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, for the most part, everyone was, I really appreciated everyone kind of having a similar tone of, like, people want to just talk about this game because there's not enough hours in the day to talk about this, and B, you coming from a really interesting perspective of someone who got a lot of ire, whether it be rightfully or wrongfully so, but also then, hey, there's a human being at the end of that Facebook or at the end of that Twitter avatar.
Right.
So first question we have is by Yukafu, who says, do you have any interest in playing Strange Journey, which is considered to have the best story out of all SMT games, or SMT4, especially Apocalypse, the latter of which has a cast of characters that is actually present through the entire game with actual character arcs?
Absolutely. If it's a JRPG with good story, like, I'm in. Yeah, I don't know when I'll make time for all of these, because I know, like, they're pretty substantial games, and I have a pretty busy schedule, but, like, eventually, I'd probably like to play them all for at least 10 or 15 hours to see if I like them. So
I'll give you a bit of warning for both in different things. So one's going to sound very elitist, but just take my word, this is honest. It's not me being comic book guy. Do not play the 3DS remake of Strange Journey.
Okay.
It added voice acting, only in Japanese. Extra insulting because that is a game that is not in Japan and has primarily ethnic and diverse cast, but I'm so glad we got only Japanese people to dub it. They redid the art style, which is really funny because I love Doi's art style, but he so did not need to redo the art for that game. So if you ever get a chance to just play the original DS, whether it be on emulator or wherever, the original totally holds up. It is really long and really, really hard, but it is actually one of the best kind of examples of, hey, here's something that's very classic SMT, interesting story, very, very good music, and very interesting premise, just because, hey, you're not in Tokyo for once. You are in a hell-warped Antarctica on a, it's basically Shin Megami Tensei mixed with the thing in terms of tone.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So really, really good stuff there. The 3DS one is an interesting, it's cool that they did that as a re-release for it, but it was one of those things that they were tasked with re-releasing one of the most cult classic SMT games of all time, and they just kind of stirred the pot a little too long.
Okay.
And yeah, so with 4 and Apocalypse, I think those are also great, but the thing with those is that's going to be another one of, give yourself some time away from 5. Because that one actually uses 3D models, and if you're gonna go from 5 to 4, you're gonna be like, whoo, okay, you know what, let's get a little more distance between these two.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I haven't finished Persona 4 Golden yet, is because going from Royal straight to P4, there's definitely a difference in visual quality and in dungeon layouts and stuff. It's not quite as polished, I would say.
I will also say this because I can never not recommend this enough. Anyone listening to this, if you've not played Tokyo Mirage Sessions Encore, you need to change that. It's one of the best Atlas games of all time.
I keep hearing that, and I keep hearing Devil Survivor. Like a lot of people call me
Oh, so
to play
Devil Survivor. This could be a Devil Survivor fan cast. So Devil Survivor is one of my absolute favorites. Like it's one of the best Atlas games I've ever done. Like one of my favorite SMTs. Those are just so different though because they are strategy RPGs, but they have a lot of SMT at their core. Those are 10 out of 10. Those are the opposite of Strange Journey. Don't touch the originals ever. Just play the 3DS remakes. They are
Okay.
That's the perfect one. If they didn't touch the graphics, they just added more new gameplay and voice acting. So they like
Nice.
Devil Survivor. Always recommend Devil Survivor. Perfect. At Death 11 says, I think it was a good review. My only problem with the review was the headline. It just felt unnecessary. And I kind of wanted to ask you with this of like, how much kind of headway or say do you really get in a sense of, obviously when you're writing a review, it's going and passing through multiple hands. Do you ever have moments of like being like, hey, I want this to be the headline, or I think this will make a good first impression?
Sometimes the editors will tweak this. So this is kind of a two-part answer. First, I have to say, like, this is totally I have to own up to it, and I have to say mea culpa, because I wrote the headline, and I wrote the Twitter blurb. So that's all on me. That's not IGN.
That's going on your tombstone now. It's too late.
I don't think I should have written it that way. If I knew what I know now, I would not have used that as a Twitter blurb. And it's not that I was trying to incite like hate clicks. I don't get paid a penny more if my article gets 0 views or 1 million.
If
views.
only IGN was actually that cynical, it would, because the only reason it works is because they literally always goof into it without knowing it. Like no one at IGN's like, guys, we fucking got them this time. They're gonna go. They're coming on this video.
If I got paid per click, that article would have been called Shin Megami Tensei V Review Free iPhone Jennifer Lawrence Side Boob. Like it was.
That's actually the original subtitle. They had to cut it out. Nintendo didn't like Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah. It just didn't. It didn't hit the same in the West.
No,
so
Side boob does hit differently.
So yeah, that was me. That was not. I saw people on Reddit saying, "Oh, IGN just threw her under the bus with this like clickbaity." It was not clickbaity. I do agree that like I shouldn't have led with that. I will say that like that's a mea culpa. I did not know about this like giant like controversy within the SMT fandom. I really didn't. Where it's like a meme to compare stuff to Persona 5. I literally did not know.
That's the one thing like I can give you some forgiveness for not knowing about it. Was no one aware? I mean, because I know Polygon gets dunked on pretty much as Kotaku does. Like when the Polygon preview went up, I hope that people learned from this. Learn from the reception of this preview.
Yeah.
Maybe people will like see, okay. But what's funny is because I don't know if you read other reviews really, but like you are not the only review that sounds like that. There were many, like, it was very split down the middle of people jumping out of the gates making comparisons because that's their personal history.
Well, and, like, there were some that even I was, like, kind of, like, raising my eyebrow at. Like, one of the reviews said, like, they missed, like, the slice of life elements from Persona, and I was like, yeah, but that would not have worked in this game. Like, yeah, so... so that was me. That was not me being thrown under the bus by IGN. I didn't do it to farm clicks. It was literally just... I've admitted to it. I'm a huge Persona 5 simp, and I like to talk about how much I like Persona 5. That accusation is 100% accurate, and if that's your main issue with my review, you are correct, and I have internalized your criticism, and I think your criticism has merit. So... I didn't know that was like a thing that like SMT mainline fans are sick of having their game compared to Persona.
That's also such a vocal minority thing because like at least with SMTN as a community, we just like both. Like we also talk about things that are not Atlas. Like we're all adults here. We're all people who like understand. Like we will talk about Persona and SMT as much as we will about Hyperdimension Neptunia. Like there's no like this goes but not this. So like it's definitely one of those. It is a vocal minority. But then kind of going back to what I said at the beginning of the show, I think a lot of it is just not people getting offended by it, but just feeling like, oh hey, this is funny if I also act upset by this. Even though let's be honest, if that actually upset you, you have a very lucky life.
Yeah. You need to work on yourself, gamer. If you get that upset and are that unable to regulate your emotions, because somebody disagreed with you about a video and didn't even actually disagree with you. Like, I really liked the game.
I like when I look at the people who like kind of dogpile on it. I always remember that like video.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like a Vine or whatever, but it's that kid of like he like goes to his little brother's room and he's like shirtless. He's like huffing and puffing, like crying, but really really mad at the same time. Like that's the people. Like I'm equally as mad as I am upset while reading this for no reason.
Yeah, and I hope Atlas blacklists you, and I hope you get fired, and I hope you fall in a hole and die. It's like you're being embarrassing. Like, take a moment to yourself. Count to 10 or something. Come on.
So another one we have by Zanzibar says, I definitely have said this probably way more, so I will let you just answer this. What were your personal expectations going into SMT5? Because you had said you were looking forward to it as an Atlas fan, but like, had you been following the media hype of this, or was it just kind of a cool, let's go into this?
I knew, like, the one thing I knew going in that I had been, told by people who had played the other games in the series is that it is very difficult, which is true. It is. I like hard games though. I'm also like a big Souls fan.
I was just waiting. This isn't going to happen with like, because I don't think this has happened with general press, but I know this is going to happen when like the like fans who are like reviewing this game when put out. There's going to be some smarmy douchebag on Friday who's going to post reviews like, "This is the easiest game I've ever played. It is clearly made for Persona babies." And I'm like, I died 10 minutes into this game. Like, this game will kill you.
Here's the thing: if you're like a JRPG veteran, I think the first half of this game, outside of a couple of bosses, might feel like on the easy-ish side to you if you're playing on normal. When you get to like the last quarter of the game, if you don't like do what I do and spend like 30 minutes in the World of Shadows building like this ridiculous, like, I called it absolutely stupid when I was talking to another friend I was reviewing this with. Like there's just shit that they shouldn't even allow you to do. Like, I was just building these, like, ridiculous combinations of resistances and stuff to just, like, blow through the last dungeon. And even then, some of the bosses in the last 5 hours were just handing me my ass. So, yeah. Give it time. If you're in the first half of the game and it's not quite living up to your expectations for difficulty, 1, you can play on hard. 2, just wait, is what I would say.
So, also, I will say it is funny, though, you mentioned the thing about, like, you can make this game as easy or as hard for you as you want.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There is such a weird, then, thought in the back of your head going, like, they also made DLC, 3 separate DLC packages to make this game easier. Like, so it's like, and actually 4 if you want to consider the super easy mode. Yeah. So it's like one of those weird ones of like, I like, you can't even be like, it's the cynical thing, like they made it hard to sell you DLC, because like, if you mess with the game, you can make it as easy as you want, you just have to know the systems. Or if you just don't want to know the systems, give them $3 and then they'll let you level up every 5 minutes.
Oh, you see, I didn't even realize. Like, the version I have doesn't have any DLC on it, so I didn't even know what the DLC they're releasing is.
Basically, so yeah,
casual difficulty.
So besides casual difficulty, there are like 6 packs. Basically, 3 are for demons. Actually, 1 is for a demi-fiend super fight, which has like a boss rush mode, but that actually seems like substantial DLC. And the other ones are, you know, those like little douchebag orb guys. I always forget their names, but the ones who will pretty much block everything but one attack. But if you do kill them, they give you a ton of money and XP.
Yeah, which is, by the way, if you don't like grinding, learn how those guys work, because you can avoid 90% of the grinding if you learn how those guys work.
And they're scattered, and they are scattered everywhere in the map. But the thing about that is the DLC map makes a map appear that is just them. So it will be a place you go to a fountain, you go to the world select, and it says, I would like the free money world, I would like the free experience for myself world, or I would like the free grimoires for my demons to level up. And it just basically becomes every battle you do, free level up. Every battle you do, free level up.
Wow, okay. Yeah. That would be pretty powerful. Yeah.
Next one we have here is by Mirthmouser. Mirthmouser says, I do have to like mix and match them because I loved that someone was like genuinely like, I'm excited to talk about this, and they're like, hold on, I found out who you are. I need to change my answer because I saw you reviewed IGN. But thankfully it wasn't.
I thought the original question was fine.
No, yeah, I was like, because
Yeah.
Mirth is one of our Patreon producers, and I just really love the idea. It's not like someone was like, oh, sorry, hold on, no, you're cool, never mind, don't read that message, it's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it says, when do you believe it's very appropriate to kind of compare games? And this always comes up a lot, but like for you, did you kind of want to go into like, for what aspect of it was you kind of wanting to compare the games themselves very like A to B, and when was it like of, hey, I'm giving you context because guess what? You're not going to sit down for an hour-long podcast before reading my review to find out my history.
Right. Well, I think like just in general, when you're evaluating anything, it kind of makes sense as a shorthand to compare it to other things. I definitely see the comparison with, like I said, if I had known that this was such a huge deal with the SMT community, I would have scaled back the number of times I mentioned Persona 5 in that review. I definitely would have. I think it's valid in general to like compare two things like that. In some cases, I was trying to add context. In some cases, I could have said the exact same thing without saying the word persona. Like when I was talking about, characters and stuff, I could have just said, I like, games that are more character driven, that have more like, expansive backstories and things like that. And that like, I recognize the SMT mainline series takes a more minimalistic approach to story, which isn't like the wrong way to do things, but I am allowed to prefer one over the other. And I do kind of prefer the way Persona approaches story versus the way like SMT5 does. So that's more what I was getting at. It wasn't that I was like trying to rile anybody up. And as far as like providing context versus just directly comparing two games, yeah, I've done a little bit of both of that. I think those are both valid techniques for criticism, but because of the history between these two series, I maybe should have erred more on the side of let's just talk about the mechanics without saying the name of the other game.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I honestly think this goes back to what we were talking about of like general games press for the most part does not think about us as much as we like to dunk on them, and because we are not like that large of a series, like spoilers, the next SMT game, people are not going to remember this during the review process. So if there is another situation of, let's say, Shin Megami Tensei 6 comes out, and let's say Persona 5 or 6 is the next big thing, there is such a chance of I could totally see this happen again, because this is going to be something people forget after the weekend's done anyway. So it's just one of those kind of funny things of like, it's not like this, we are not Pokemon. We will not have a too much water. Like, yes, it is easy now for the next couple of days to say Persona without the heart. That is not going to be the too much water of IGN. Like that, like it's just not going to persist like that. Like, this is such a repeatable thing that could definitely happen that, like, obviously, like you've said, there are lessons to learn from it, but that's like with any review. Like, there are so many times I've posted something where 5 minutes after I'm like, oh god, why the fuck did I do that? But then it's like, it's out there, so why Barbara Streisand affect it, remove it, and try and act like it never happened?
Yeah. Well, like, my job is criticizing things, so it would be absolutely silly for me to say that you could take any piece of writing I've ever written and not be able to criticize it. Like, of course you can. And if it's not toxic, I actually appreciate hearing that criticism because it'll allow me to do my job better in the future. So that's why I didn't get like bent out of shape about it unless people were being like super toxic and like saying that I should get fired or I should die or something like that. Mm-hmm. So.
And you had kind of mentioned this before, but you were not going into after publishing this review. You were not thinking like you were going to be the review everyone talked about.
No, I mean, I generally assume because I'm writing for IGN that I will be one of the most visible reviews. But I did not in any sense anticipate like how much this would like stir up controversy on Twitter and stuff.
I don't know, sure. Like if you don't want to get into this, you totally don't have to, but I was just curious, after publishing it, had anyone from IGN actually reached out to you? Has anyone from the site been like made any comments, whether it have been positive or being like, hey, what do you think about this, or has it just kind of been like you've just been left to your own devices?
No, I had some people reach out to me. I'm on the IGN Slack as a freelancer, and I had some people reach out to me just to be like, "Hey, are you okay?" Like, I know you're getting a lot of harassment for this. And I just told them, yeah, it's fine. Like, I've dealt with this before. But yeah, they weren't like concerned that like, oh, we need to edit this review, or we need to change the headline.
Yeah, that's I mean, not to sound like an asshole. I would assume people were worried for your concern, but I was also wondering if there was anyone from an editorial side who might have brought it up to you or been like, hey, do you want to change or do anything different?
No.
Okay.
No, that wasn't really a concern at all. They trust me. They've known me for like 8-9 years. If I write something and I stand by it, and it's been through the editorial process, and whatever editor or editors looked at it stand by it, we might change something if it turns out. It's happened a couple of times where like something I said was factually incorrect. Like, I think I found out there's actually 4 endings instead of 3, which like I didn't even know that there's like a secret. There's 3 that are like really obvious, where you get to a point in the game and it's like, choose your path. So I said in the review there were 3 endings, and I think we might have changed that just because I found out there's actually a 4th one. But if it's not a factual inaccuracy, generally they're not going to make a big deal about something I wrote because it caused controversy.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like, oh, we need to edit this to be less controversial. That's never happened.
And I guess kind of like a last one, I know there's a bajillion other things, but I know we need to start kind of wrapping things up on here. Let's just, I guess, if as nicely as we could put a bow on this situation, you kind of have the floor. Obviously, this is not live, so please feel free to take as much time if you do want to think of a longer answer or not, or if you've thought about this before. Someone comes up to you and says, what do you mean when you read Persona but without the heart? Like what would you kind of translate to them if you could kind of elaborate on that more now, reflecting on the situation?
I mean, I think it's important to add the background context that like, I don't just really like Persona 5. Persona 5 is a game that like changed my life. And I could basically do a whole podcast just on that. Like, if we had another hour, I could talk about that extensively. So it is like, yeah, I have a very strong emotional association with Persona 5 and with those characters. It helped me through. I mean, it would be either number 1 or 2 in terms of the hardest times in my life is when I found that game. And those were like my friends when I felt very depressed and isolated and that like my life was over, basically. So there's definitely that context to have that's important, that like we all have media that is always going to be particularly special to us because of what it represents in our lives and like where we were in our lives when we bumped into it. I'm sure anyone listening to this has an example of that they could think of. So if you want to call that bias, you're welcome to. I feel like I got a little bit off track. What was the
No, you're good. You're good. It was more kind of if you had an answer to someone being like, what does Persona without the heart mean to you when you hear that?
So I guess what I was missing from SMT5, which doesn't mean I want them to turn mainline SMT into Persona. Again, I don't care. I don't think they should add dating elements. I don't think they should add a slice of life subplot. I don't think that it needs to be about the power of friendship. There are way more interesting themes to explore beyond just that. I think what it was missing was that just like feeling this unforgettable connection with a group of characters and with a world, and just like there are moments in Persona 5 spoilers are probably okay at this point, right?
Oh, trust me, yeah.
The moment in Persona 5 that like I always think about it, like other than like Makoto's awakening scene, which like I cannot play through that with just absolutely bawling, crying. Like when you think Joker is dead and finally you get to the end of that cutscene and Ryuji's like, I can't believe it, we got him. Like, it's like stuff like that. And like I just feel like there wasn't a moment like that in SMT5. Like there wasn't that sort of like emotionally impactful storytelling. And that is the core of what I mean when I say it felt a little bit I did say sometimes when I said it sometimes feels like Persona without the heart.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that for sure.
Yeah.
The only other one, just because I thought it was interesting, somebody asked this, was someone was asking, what is your opinion now, if you can reflect on it, what if someone just says, like a total random stranger came up to you who likes video games, but is not really aware of whatever the review reception was, and says, oh, what do you think of the Shin Megami Tensei community? What would your initial reaction be then?
I think for the majority of people are cool, and I think that's true in most fandoms, and I think that's true of humanity in general. I think most people are generally pretty cool. I think that there in almost every fandom there is a very toxic vocal minority of people. But overall, most of the interactions I've had, even with, like I said at the very beginning, even with SMT fans who said they completely disagreed with my review, have been pretty positive. Or if they have criticism, they're presenting it to me respectfully, and it's like, that's fine. If you want to, post memes, that's also fine. Like I can laugh at myself. I don't care if you want to meme on me and stuff like that. So I think it's a very passionate fan group, and very passionate fandoms tend to maybe have the loudest and the most toxic vocal minorities. Not talking just about SMT, but like a lot of fandoms I've involved in, that's true. I know there's toxic Persona fans as well. I know that on that side of the fence, I know that there are some incredibly toxic people that I'm not saying it's just the mainline SMT people at all. Yeah, I think it's a group I could generally get along really well with, because you all like really gritty, like deep, hardcore types of, difficult games that explore interesting themes, and I'm into all of that. I'm really excited to be able to talk about stuff like, what essences should you use to be able to beat the final boss, and like, here's what I did, and like, here's what my final team looked like, and here's how I was able to conserve my mana through the like immense slog that was the final dungeon. Here's some like clever little things I figured out where you can save like 7 mana per turn on this specific group of enemies. Like, I love nerding out over stuff like that. And that seems to be like what a lot of SMT fans like about this series, and yeah, I'm on the same side here. I might prefer Persona, but that doesn't mean that I have any, angst or like,
but what's great?
at all.
What's great is you've just dipped your pinky toe. You have so many other you have so many other chances to fight. Like, you don't even know who Raido Kuzunoha is. When you find out who this handsome demon summoner is, you're gonna be like, oh my, what was I hanging out with these prissy high school boys for? I should have been hanging out with this man. But I mean,
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
I think that was a great answer. Also, I just want to extra thank you, not only for coming on and doing the show, but also being so upfront. It was funny you mentioned your DMs. I thought about it after I DM'd you. I was like, you know what? This person has their DMs open. I wonder if it is just a total flood, and I will just have no chance in hell of being poking through it at all.
No, yeah, I tend to I get a lot when I review a big game, but it's not so many that like I can't read them all. Like, I read every single DM that I got about this
every
review,
single DM.
Yeah, and most of them were positive. Like, there not a lot that were really toxic. So.
Well, at the very least, I know we can all join hands and come together as a society, really, and agree that God, dude, Sophia is just so hot. Like, I'm so glad we got rid of that old guy. Like, she is just like it. Think about I know you haven't played the other SMT games. Before Sophia, we had an old guy with glasses and a beard. His name was Mito. I do not miss him. Every time I summon demons, I'm like, can we give her more lines? Like, there's a reason this lady lives with a giant 600-foot statue of herself and is not considered narcissistic. Like, she can do no wrong. She's doing a great job.
I didn't even think about the fact that, like, oh yeah, she does have like a gigantic statue of herself. That's pretty funny.
When you're just, and remember, she's not wearing any clothes. That is just strategic nipple coverage. Like, she bears it all. She has no shame, and she's giving out free organ lessons. Do you think Nahabino knew how to play that fucking thing? No way. There's an entire filler arc episode of Dragon Ball Z dedicated to him learning the organs.
Well, and hey, if it comes out on PC, I'm sure somebody will remove the strategic nipple coverage. That's mods. That it'll happen. It'll happen.
They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. Well, I'm sorry. I was very bad about keeping us to our tight 90. But if you would like
it's all good.
If you would like to let everyone know where they can find you, that we can wrap this puppy up.
Yeah, I'm at Till Folkvang on Twitter, TILFOLKVANG. That's Freya's Hall in Asgard. Those of you that are SMT fans probably know a fair bit of mythology.
Oh man, when I saw Idun, I was like, I went to my wife. I was like, look at this beautiful blonde-haired lady. I was so happy she was there.
I fed her grimoires and I kept her as my main healer for the entire game. That golden apple ability is so good.
So clutch. And one of the best animations in the game. One of the best.
Yeah, it's great animation, and it's just full party heal and buff all of your stats. Yes, thank you. I will take it. You can find my work on IGN, PC Gamer, a couple other places. I do 2 podcasts that are both related to strategy games. So if you are into strategy games, I produce 3 Moves Ahead, which is more of a general podcast, and then I also produce No CB, which is grand strategy specifically, mostly the Paradox grand strategy games is the main thing we talk about on there. So I'd love to say hi to you all. I'd love to hear your tips and your recommendations on how to dive deeper into the murky black pool that is Shin Megami Tensei. Yeah.
Awesome. If you have somehow found this hopefully not too clickbaity title somewhere on your own and you went, what the heck is this? How has this gone on for 243 episodes? This is a weekly Shin Megami Tensei podcast where God knows I'm not going to only talk about SMT5 for the rest of my life. But gosh dang it, I got to talk about it and expunge it all from my body. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, all the places you find podcasts. If you would like to help keep this dumpster fire going, you can go to patreon.com/SMTN. Support us at the $1 level. Get the show early, ask questions, be a general cool guy, gal, or whatever, and be an SMTN fan. Or $5 a month, you get to become an executive producer like Jagingus, Pat, Philip, and Solaire. So thank you so much to all of our producers or fans in general. You guys are awesome. Len, thank you so much for letting me steal your Friday night and way too much of your time. I really appreciate you coming on and just having to put up with me for 90 minutes.
No, thanks so much. I really appreciate the platform, and it was a lot of fun.
And now is where we awkwardly say goodbye to everyone, and I end our recordings, and then we can say our actual goodbyes. So goodbye, everybody.